During their summer vacation, Kelly and Sophie are preparing to go climbing in the mountains of Italy. A few months ago, Kelly lost her fiancé in an accident and has still not been able to recover from her grief. In an attempt to help her friend overcome this great loss, Sophie organizes the trip and suddenly some unknown men arrive on the scene. When she sees them, Sophie gets excited and soon takes an interest in Josh, who respectfully approaches her to introduce himself. During the conversation, the young man invites the two young women to go out with their friends and start the weekend celebrations. However, when she looks at Kelly and realizes that she's not at all excited, Sophie declines the invitation. Meanwhile, Nathan tells that Josh is engaged to Amy and yet he never misses an opportunity to be with other women. Unlike his friend, the other three guys, who are also in a relationship, are determined to remain faithful to their girlfriends, and Josh starts making fun of them for it. After Josh leaves, Sophie talks to her friend and manages to convince her to go out with those guys. Then, at dusk, they all gather around a bonfire and the girls discover that their new friends met during college. Since graduating, they get together once a year to go on a trip, but this time they decided to do something different and chose climbing. While Sophie enjoys getting to know the stories of these strangers, Kelly feels increasingly uncomfortable in their presence and decides to go back to the cottage. When she gets up to leave, Josh holds her arm and tries to convince her to stay, but this only serves as an even greater reason for the young woman to leave. After going to bed, Kelly watches some old videos of the last trip she took with her fiancé, who was obsessed with climbing. At that moment, the young woman begins to cry with longing for Luca and remembers the exact day she met him. After a few hours of conversation and a few glasses of booze, Josh and Sophie kiss, and when the young woman leaves to go to the toilet, Nathan advises his friend not to continue this romance. After all, he has a fiancé. Hearing this, Josh gets up and goes after Sophie. When she sees him, the young woman is frightened and tries to get away, but the man tries to grab her and ends up being scratched. As she tries to run away, Sophie falls to the ground and starts screaming for help. Just then, Josh's friends hear her screams and rush over to help her. Furious, Reynolds attacks him and strikes the young man, because he always knew he didn't have a good character. At this point, Sophie runs off and the other guys come over to break up the fight. When they realize how big a problem this could be, the guys decide to talk to Sophie to try to calm her down, but she's too scared and runs away. During the run, the girl ends up on the edge of the cliff and Nathan grabs her from behind to stop her trying to escape. At this point, Sophie bites his hand and manages to get free, but is hit by Josh, who knocks her off the cliff with one punch. Hearing her friend's screams, Kelly immediately gets out of bed and runs to the fire, but finds no one there. Meanwhile, the four friends climb down the cliff to check on Sophie and find her completely weakened. Despite her serious injuries, Sophie is still alive and begging for help, so Reynolds takes out his cell phone to call the emergency services. At this point, Josh grabs the phone from his friend's hand and throws it away, because he knows he'll be arrested when Sophie tells the police what happened. Even so, Reynolds remains determined to do whatever he can to save her and asks for Nathan's cell phone, but his friend ends up agreeing with Josh. Since Taylor is a lawyer, he knows that, given the scratch on Josh's face and the bite on Nathan's hand, it would be very easy to frame them as guilty, because given the evidence, any prosecutor would believe that they were trying to eliminate her. Furious, Reynolds claims to know that Josh would do something like this again, as the man went through a similar situation in college. At the time, the criminal wasn't arrested and claims he won't be caught now. So, as there is no way of saving Sophie without convicting himself, Josh decides to leave her there so that when she loses her life, it will all seem like an accident. At this point, Sophie once again begs for help and Josh is afraid that someone will find her still alive. So instead of leaving her there alone, he decides to eliminate her once and for all and picks up a rock to attack her with. Seeing his friend about to make the biggest mistake of his life, Reynolds tries to stop him, so Josh takes a knife and threatens him in order to force him to be part of his plainville. After hitting Sophie's head with the rock, Josh passes the object to Nathan and he makes his second attack. Josh then smears Reynolds' hands with blood so that he can be found just as guilty as everyone else. After the crime, the group tries to think of a convincing story to explain what happened to Sophie and agree to tell the same version if they are questioned. Meanwhile, Kelly walks through the forest looking for her friend and turns on her camera when she sees the four men gathered on the edge of the cliff. When she realizes that Sophie is already lifeless and her body is being disposed of, Kelly freaks out and screams. Immediately, the woman realizes she has been spotted and flees so as not to become the next victim. At high speed, she runs uphill and is pursued by the cowards who want to destroy her camera. When she realizes that she is about to be caught, Kelly hides behind a rock and the men split up to look for her. Minutes later, The young woman comes out of hiding and tries to reach the chalet where she is staying to get her climbing equipment, but ends up being found by Reynolds and the man allows her to escape. After grabbing her backpack, Kelly rushes into the mountains, knowing that this is her best chance of escaping those lunatic criminals. Since she has climbing experience and those guys are just tourists, Kelly believes they won't be able to reach her and starts climbing without any safety equipment. Seeing the woman climbing the mountain, Taylor decides to go after her and tries to pull her down. At that moment, the man knocks the camera out of Kelly's backpack and slips, but manages to hold on to the grooves in the rock. While the pursuer keeps trying to catch up with her, the climber diverts her route to take the camera back and, after doing so, she continues climbing. Minutes later, Taylor manages to reach her again, but Kelly knocks him down with a kick and the man breaks his leg as he falls to the ground. While Nathan tries to calm his wounded friend, Josh blames Reynolds for allowing the young woman to run away, so the trio decide to take Reynolds back to the cottage. After giving his injured friend some pills, the other guys make the decision to leave him alone to go after Kelly and advise Taylor to call for help if they don't return in the next 24 hours. If all goes well, by then Josh intends to have gotten rid of all the evidence and witnesses that could link him to a crime. When she realizes that the men have given up chasing her, Kelly decides to take a break for a few minutes to rest and put on her safety equipment. Then she realizes that her rope has fallen while she was trying to escape from Taylor, but she continues climbing anyway, because going down is more dangerous than trying to complete the climb. In addition to the ropes, Kelly has also lost her cell phone and gloves, so Josh believes she will fall before she reaches the top. As it's very cold up there and the young woman hasn't taken any protection, the chances of her freezing and losing her life are also very high. Knowing that he won't be able to complete the climb, Josh decides to go behind the mountain, along the easiest path, and wait for his victim at the top. At this point, the man realizes that he has forgotten his gloves at the cottage and goes to get them. While waiting for his friend to return, Reynolds tries to convince Nathan to tell the police the truth and say that it was Josh who eliminated Sophie. However, Nathan knows that they won't be able to get away with it if the video ends up in the hands of the authorities, so he decides to stick to the plan. In the meantime, Kelly continues to climb and, halfway up, she feels the scaly body of a snake crawling over her hand. Terrified, the woman remains motionless while looking in the opposite direction so as not to lose control. When the snake leaves, she climbs some more and takes another break to drink water, but this time she accidentally knocks over her bottle. Seeing the object fall off the mountain, Josh celebrates, knowing that dehydration will make it even harder for Kelly to succeed on that climb. Even so, the young woman doesn't let it get to her and continues to work towards her goal regardless of the difficulties she encounters along the way. During the climb, Kelly remembers the advice she received from her fiancé when they met at the mountaineering club, and this gives her more courage to finish her mission. When she reaches a certain point, the climber sees an old rope that someone left behind during a climb and tries to reach it. However, when she realizes that she won't be able to catch the rope, Kelly rips a part of her backpack to get the wire used to support the fabric and forms a hook to pull the rope towards her. After swinging into it, Kelly manages to change her route and takes the easiest path to continue her journey. Meanwhile, Josh and his friends, who took the easy way up, arrive halfway up the mountain and realize that Kelly is just below that cliff. Determined to get the camera back, they throw a rope for the young woman to tie the device to the other end and claim that if the camera is handed over, nothing bad will happen to her. However, Kelly knows that this is a big lie, so instead of complying with Josh's demands, she sends him a note with a message written on it. As the woman refuses to cooperate, the trio decide to wait on the cliff, as they know she is trapped. Having lost most of her equipment, Kelly can't get down and, on her way up, she ends up being captured. Luckily, the climber finds a tent nearby and decides to use it for the night, but first she needs to bandage her wounds, as her hand is completely bruised. During the wait, Reynolds has the chance to talk to Nathan once again and says that Josh didn't climb that mountain just to get the camera. If Kelly comes out of this alive, she could still testify about what she saw, so Josh certainly intends to eliminate her. While Kelly sets up the hanging tent, Reynolds says he's going to call Taylor to see if he's okay, but Josh says they can't do that, as the police will certainly check the call history. Since the plan is to say that the four friends climbed the mountain together, it's important that there are no holes in the story, otherwise they'll be found out. During the night, the trio set up camp on the edge of the cliff and Nathan took the opportunity to take a look at Kelly's social networks. In doing so, he discovered that the young woman had a fiancé and, the previous year, they had both tried to climb the same mountain. However, during the climb, Luca fell and didn't survive. The next day, it will be a year since the young man lost his life and Kelly has decided to climb Mount Antelau in memory of her fiancé, but her plans have gone completely awry. At dawn, while Kelly is asleep, Josh and Nathan decide to attack her and, after tying a backpack to a rope, they throw it over the cliff in order to knock her out of the tent. At that moment, the climber wakes up startled and ends up slipping out of the tent. While hanging without any protection, she is hit by the heavy backpack and ends up breaking free. Just as she was about to suffer a fatal fall, Kelly grabs hold of the backpack and, when he realizes that the woman is hanging, Josh grabs a knife to cut the rope. However, before it was too late, she grabbed hold of the rock and managed to climb to safety. Soon after, Kelly enters the tent quietly so that her pursuers don't realize she's alive and goes back to sleep, believing that this time the guys will leave her alone. However, a few hours later, Nathan shows up with a knife and tears the tent apart. His aim is to get the camera back, but when he discovers that Kelly is inside, he attacks her. After forcing the woman to reveal where she kept the device, Nathan decides to let her go, so she takes out her penknife and hits her pursuer. During the duel, Kelly falls out of the tent and almost loses her backpack, but manages to hold onto it with her feet while clinging to Nathan. Hearing his friend's screams, Josh asks what's going on, but Nathan won't tell the truth. Despite knowing him for many years, Nathan knows that this guy is an out-of-control criminal and is willing to sacrifice him to ensure that Kelly is also eliminated. Then, instead of saying that the young woman is still alive, he orders his friends to pull him up. Just then, Kelly hits Nathan's knife in his leg and is almost caught by Josh, who holds her by the necklace. But before she can be caught, the climber takes the knife back and throws herself down. Luckily, once again, she manages to hold onto the tent, but soon afterwards the hook comes loose and the tent topples over. As she is standing on the rock, Kelly survives, but discovers that she has lost her necklace, which she used as a pendant for her engagement ring. Now that Nathan is injured and there is no medication to help him with the pain, Reynolds manages to convince Josh to return to the cottage as soon as dawn breaks. The young man says that Kelly won't be able to climb up or down due to lack of equipment, so she'll end up falling at some point and the camera will also be destroyed during the fall. Then, when he gives his statement to the police, Reynolds will say that both Nathan and Taylor fell during the climb and were injured. As the hours go by, Nathan's injuries only get worse and he asks Reynolds for help to get back to the camp before it's too late, as he's losing too much blood. After the latest events, Nathan has come to the conclusion that Josh is a complete lunatic and begins to suspect that he used the excuse of the gloves to return to the camp and eliminate Taylor. If his theory is right, Josh may be planning to do the same to his other two friends to ensure that no witnesses to his crime survive. To stay alive, the pair need to call for help as soon as possible, so Reynolds approaches slowly to steal Josh's watch, as the accessory has a rescue system attached. What Reynolds didn't expect was for the young man to be awake listening to the whole conversation and, when his friend approaches, Josh attacks him. After threatening to throw him off the cliff, the man walks towards Nathan and reveals that he has been having a secret relationship with Jessica since college. When he discovers that he's being betrayed by his girlfriend and one of his best friends for all these years, he's furious and his disappointment increases even more when he realizes that Reynolds and Taylor knew about it and didn't tell him. After a brief discussion, the trio decide to go back to rest so that they can descend the mountain the next morning. Meanwhile, Kelly fights sleep to keep from falling off the mountain. In the middle of the night, Nathan gets up to relieve himself and, while standing on the edge of the cliff, he is attacked by Josh, who uses a climbing hammer to hit him on the head. Just then, Nathan falls off the mountain and Josh gets rid of his things to tell Reynolds that his friend has come down the mountain to get to the chalet at dawn. Now that they're both awake, Reynolds decides to go down to negotiate with Kelly and brings her some food. While hanging, the man tells what happened in the forest and reveals the whole truth about how Sophie lost her life. Reynolds then states that Josh will eliminate Kelly if she refuses to give him what he wants and promises that if the woman hands over the camera, nothing bad will happen to her. According to the young man, his friend went down the mountain to ask for help and Kelly will soon be rescued, but the climber says she saw Nathan's body falling from the top 2 hours ago. Upon hearing this, Reynolds realizes that he is the next target on Josh's list and convinces Kelly to hand over the camera to him. Before climbing back up, the man asks the climber to scream to pretend she's being attacked and, when he returns to the top of the cliff, he says he's got rid of her. When he checks the images on the camera, Josh realizes that the memory card has been removed and Reynolds calls Taylor to see if he's asked for help. Just then, he hears his friend's cell phone ring and confirms Nathan's theory that Josh has returned to the camp to eliminate him. Furious, Reynolds picks up the hammer to attack the traitor and the two start a fight, in which Josh is victorious. After immobilizing his friend, he steals the hammer from his hand and hits him repeatedly until he blacks out. When he wakes up, Reynolds realizes that he is being tied up and despairs. After pouring booze over the young man's body, Josh hits him with flames and pushes Reynolds away so that Kelly can watch him go up in. As the man screams, the rope that was being used to hold him up is destroyed by the flames and he suffers a huge fall. Minutes later, Josh prepares to go down the mountain and make his last victim of the night, because he didn't believe Reynolds when he said he'd gotten rid of Kelly. When she realizes that the stalker is on his way, the woman hides the memory card in that wall in the hope that someone will find it in the future and Josh will be punished for what he has done. In an attempt to defend herself, Kelly tries to hit the criminal with a knife, but Josh manages to dodge the attacks and hits the climber with his hammer. He then grabs Kelly's feet and threatens to pull her if she doesn't tell him where the card has been hidden. At that moment, she points to the hole where she hid the object, but when he sticks her hand in, Josh is bitten by a poisonous snake. Furious at having been tricked, the man attacks Kelly and tries to leave her breathless. However, just before she loses consciousness, the climber cuts the rope and pushes Josh out. During the fall, the criminal manages to hold on and begs for help. However, Kelly's only concern is getting her necklace back and, after retrieving it, she triggers the emergency button attached to Josh's watch. Finally, Kelly steps on the hand of the man who eliminated her friend cowardly and makes him fall off the cliff to join Nathan and Reynolds. At dawn, Kelly realizes that rescue will arrive at any moment and, in order for the helicopter to find her, she needs to get to the top of the mountain. So the climber grabs her memory card and gathers her strength to finish the climb. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.